Barbara Ann Clark graduated from Towson State College in 1972 with a bachelor's degree in elementary education. Ms. Clark served as a teacher and administrator in the Baltimore County Public Schools for over 30 years. In 2005, she came to Towson University as a member of the Towson Learning Network. These are her reflections.
Ms. Clark, thank you for sharing your thoughts about your teacher preparation at Towson University and your subsequent career in education. We're in the process of trying to enrich our understanding of teacher education at Towson University, and this will be a significant contribution to that effort. First thing I thought, a good place to begin is in the beginning. And so if you would be so kind as to share a little bit about your social context, where you grew up, the point in time when you started thinking, maybe I'll become a teacher, and why you selected Towson University.
All right, thank you. Well, I grew up in Churchville, Maryland, outside of Bel Air, went to Churchville Elementary School, rural area. Blue-collar working family. My dad was a mechanic at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so certainly I grew up in a very simple lifestyle. I do recall as a young child, he had a cousin that visited from North Carolina who was a teacher. And she came armed with a huge bag of spelling tests to grade. And she allowed me to help her, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So from that point on, I was a pretty gregarious little child. I asked my teachers at school, I was in the 3rd grade, and those teachers said, sure, we'll let you help us grade papers. And then the grading papers went to cleaning off bulletin boards, helping other kids, cleaning up bulletin boards and blackboards, helping other students with work. And I knew when I was in the 3rd grade that I wanted to be a teacher.
Wow.
And I consider myself very lucky to have made a career choice at such a young age. And then from there, when I was in high school, president of the Future Teachers of America, and we tutored children in a little church in Bel Air and did that sort of thing. But I thought, now, I know I want to be in a caring profession, a nurturing profession. Maybe I'll try candy striping because maybe it's a nurse. Maybe, because back then it was teacher, nurse, or a secretary. So I did probably about 3 months at Hartford Memorial Hospital. Decided, I didn't want to be a candy striper. The smells, what you had to endure. I said, no, it really is a teacher. So that was my decision. The reason Towson was certainly one for economical reasons. They did have the teacher's pledge back then. But if it had not even been for that, that's just where you went if you were going to be a teacher. It was a state teachers college. I knew it was, certainly a place that I had friends and other teachers that I admired at Bel Air High School and various places. That's where you went to school. So it was close. I was not able to live on campus though. And that was a challenge because by the way the crow flies, I wasn't in that radius. And when I came to Towson, it was too crowded. And I had 6, 7 roommates. They put us up on Western Run Drive, which was an apartment complex off of Western Run Drive towards the Pikesville area. And we, as Towson University students, there were 2 apartments. We were college students, we had dorm regulations, but we lived with regular residents.
Really?
Now that was a challenge. And my family, I'll never forget this, and I tell my dad often, we were certainly not wealthy. He gave me the family car, which was a 64 Chevy, to drive because we had to drive the Beltway. And I was the only one truly from this area. Most of them, one girl came from Connecticut, one from DC, all over. So my dad sacrificed the family car for me to drive from Western Run Drive to Towson. And that was that first whole year when I was a freshman. That was a challenge.
Yes.
Unexpected challenge. I knew it would be hard studying, but I didn't think that living would be such a challenge. So that was kind of an interesting twist. I think they've ended that soon after that.
Yes.
Because when we were punished, because we did have an RA that would come visit us,
Really?
we all had to stay in this apartment with all the other residents that were around us. Yes, it was quite interesting.
And how many of you were in the apartment?
There were 7.
No.
There were 7 in ours, and there were 8 in the one next door.
Oh, my heavens.
Yeah. So that was a different twist on my introduction to college life. Yeah. Yep.
And that only lasted for a year?
And then I moved to Linden Terrace. I rented a room off of Linden Terrace, so I was closer to campus then. So
And
that helped.
and you did that for the rest of your
Yes.
time?
The rest of the years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew coming in that you wanted to be a teacher.
Absolutely.
And this was an elementary level
Yes.
teacher? When you got here, of course, you had to take all of your general liberal arts requirements. Yes. And then you got into your education courses. And I'm hoping that you can recall those courses at least a little bit. And my question to you is, in remembering them, were they more theoretical or were they sort of much more practical in nature? And second thing, did you have any opportunity to interact with children before you did your student teaching? Was that incorporated into the curriculum at all?
Okay, good question. Yes, the first 2 years, all the general courses. Grade point average wasn't that great. Got to my junior year into the education courses, and from then on, had straight A's and whatever, because that's what I wanted to do. I thought about it. It was definitely a practical experience. Lots of time spent in this library looking over curriculum from other counties, looking at teacher editions, planning out lesson plans and that sort of thing. So it was really very practical training. Then, in our junior year, we did that 1 week kind of experience out in the schools. Yes, there was observation, but soon they got us into taking over a spelling lesson. Okay,
Really?
let's give you a spelling lesson and you can have reading if you'd like. And eventually we worked our way up in that 1 day a week to teaching most of the day. So it was very practical, very hands-on. And it was a variety of places. We went to Howard County because, open space had just started around that time. So one of the places we went was to Howard County and various grade levels. But they got us into those classrooms and we were doing things. Now, I don't know if that was Towson's doing, or maybe it was the teacher being very willing to let this observer be a participant in her class. It could have been a little bit of both. Yeah. So it was very hands-on, and I loved it, to say the least.
So you said, this was the right fit. Do you remember anything specifically that hung with you or turned out to be very useful in your career, or do you remember any professors that sort of stood out as role models for how you thought you might want to teach yourself?
Well, it was interesting when I was thinking back. Dr. Binko, I had him probably my last year. That would have been about 72, and I'm not sure when he started, but it was an independent study. And I thought, no one's ever told me just to take the semester, go off, research, do whatever you want. That was so unusual because it was very structured, of course, here. And I grew up in a very structured program, educational program. So here was this man giving us permission to go out there and to, pursue. It was kind of like the action research, beginnings of action research, which I thought was really neat and unusual. And I found it very beneficial because I thought, well, if kids were given a little more freedom in what they were interested in pursuing, then maybe this was a good thing. Because I found out that I still put time and effort into that course, and I was doing it on attention deficit disorder because that was just starting to come around, and experienced it in the schools and that sort of thing. So I had an opportunity to do my research on that, and I thought that was really, back then in '72, this is quite innovative. I liked it. And so I can recall when I was a classroom teacher, giving children time and choices to pursue things like that in a guided sort of way, but giving them that freedom, and nobody had ever done that before. So that's one that always stuck out in my mind. And of course, then I got my master's here in reading, and I loved all the way the whole program was designed. It was great.
So here you are, the end of your education. How are you feeling about your preparedness to become a teacher?
I thought about that too. Certainly had lots of practice and experience in that planning part. which was crucial. You know, planning out, strategizing, mapping out a unit of study. I thought that was so beneficial because, you know, even though the curriculum is given to you when you become a teacher, and it's pretty structured, you still had to do that planning piece and had to, you know, map it out and do that sequentially. I thought I really had a handle on that. The part I didn't have so much was, and the children were better behaved back then. You know, they really were. They truly sat in their seats and they were. But I didn't have probably enough education in the area of learning styles, differentiating instruction even back then, knowing more about the different ways kids would learn. And they would learn reading or they would learn math. So that was one area I thought, I'm not so hot on this. I'm going to have to do it on my own, research it. That's why I came to Towson to get my reading degree, because I wanted to understand more about the reader.
Did you have an opportunity to work with different grade levels or different kinds of students when you did your student teaching?
That's interesting too. I was at Matthew Henson down in the city.
Okay.
And I was in a first grade class. And my supervisor, coordinating teacher, her husband passed away. And right in the middle of my student teaching, and they thought, well, instead of us getting a substitute, we'll just let Barbara take the class. So I learned how to be the teacher in charge for almost a month. And it was when they had the initial teaching alphabet just came into being, that little innovative piece. ITA.
Remember it well.
Yeah, those 16 character kind of things. And so I really did become the teacher of record for that period of time. So I did not switch to another grade. Even though some of my partners that came from Towson, we had a carpool, they were switching. I stayed. The principal felt comfortable enough to leave me in that classroom, and so did the wonderful lady that I work with. And I thought, what a bet! I was ready for it. Bring it on. You know, let me do this. I can do this. And so that's how I spent my student teaching, and I loved it every minute of it. You know, because I always thought I could be in charge, even when I was in the third grade. So it was okay. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. So that was a little different.
Different experience. Well, so of course, an ITA is a very structured program, reading program. So that was kind of useful too, so that you really followed a script to some extent.
Learned a lot about classroom management at that point in time.
Okay, and that came out of really this hands-on experience.
And because the gal that I replaced, she was an elderly woman, and she was loving but stern. So those children did exactly, and plus it was an all African-American school. She was too. So it's like, okay, now she's removed. So I had to learn really quick how to establish myself as the teacher.
I guess so.
And it, you know, came pretty easily though. I was surprised. I didn't have any issues with that. So.
Well, maybe she had them sort of in shape when you took over.
I think it was about November when that happened, so.
Well, and that's an important sort of trial by fire for new teachers, but didn't expect it.
I think the rules and regulations were probably a little different back in.
I would think so.
That would have been 71, that fall of 71.
Yes. I don't know that we would entrust a class to a student teacher.
No, not this day and age.
No. 2012, don't think that's going to happen.
But a great learning experience. So it was wonderful.
Yeah. So where did you start teaching? You had said earlier in a conversation with me that you had a contract before you even graduated.
April. I had already signed a contract with Baltimore County. I knew that I was going to be at Elmwood Elementary School in the northeast part of Baltimore County even before I graduated.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was hitting the education needing of teachers at the right time in my life. You know, they needed teachers, they needed to fill those positions. I had great letters of recommendation. I had wonderful grades the second half of my college career. So I already had a contract. So that was good.
Yes. And what grade did you get?
I taught first grade.
Oh, first grade again.
For 12 years.
Wow.
And then I moved to third grade in the southeast part in Dundalk area for 2 years. And then I moved on as a resource teacher and became an administrator. But they didn't have mentor teachers back then, so you really relied on your fellow neighboring teachers who had experience to teach you how to teach phonics, to how to, teach math. We were big into learning centers back then. So we would spend our free time, our summers, getting together, coloring, cutting, pasting, making stations. I mean, it was truly our life. And I had wonderful teachers that taught me how to be. One of them I still visit. She lives in Oak Crest.
Who's that?
Her name is Kathy Perano. Her name was Kathy Miller. She was a student here. She came to Towson. Wonderful gal, and she just had to sell her house in Bel Air, and they moved to Oak Crest. And in a message, she said, I actually still had things from first grade. And she's like 78 years old, when she taught first grade. So I had a wonderful teacher.
So you really did sort of have an informal mentor.
And friend.
And maybe that's why we are thinking that mentoring is so important. It's just feedback from folks who said, I didn't have an official mentor, but people were good.
And we had large classrooms then. I can remember my first year, 40 students.
No.
Absolutely. 40 students. Yep. And that school became a Title I school, and so then we received parent helpers, instructional assistants to help. But those were large classrooms. And there would be, like 5 first grade classes. And I mean, there were a lot of kids, thus the need for teachers then.
And what was the socioeconomic background? Because you were in Northeast, right?
Yes, the Northeast, but we drew from the Garden Village, which was right over the city line.
Right.
So it was a lower economic area. Yeah, that's the Title I influence.
Right, eventually, yeah, you got that designation.
And it was about 30% African American then, and it's much larger now. And that was pretty much the two populations. I did happen to have a Korean child in my class at one year because her dad was going to be a doctor, and he was here for his little internship, and they were living in that area. So she was a great experience for all of us. We were learning some other culturals and things. It wasn't too diverse back then, So it was a great experience.
And then you went to Dundalk.
For 2 years. Open space school. So I got to experience that.
Well, I have asked anybody who's had that kind of experience what they thought of the open space experience. And I guess I have the same question for you.
We're in open space, but we made walls. We made walls with bookcases, with stackables, with whatever. We did, because there would always be those kids that would be distracted by any other sound that was going on. And plus myself, because one of the teachers, I remember, she had such a booming voice that, I'd just get lost in my own thinking. So we made our own barriers, But it was great for sharing, once again. It was kind of a mentoring thing. And in that group was an older woman returning to teaching after 17 years. Myself, who had already had 12 years, and then a first-year teacher. So we had a nice bond. It was really great. So I did learn a lot from there. But from there, I moved on to being a resource teacher.
And a Title I?
Yes.
And what is a Title I resource teacher?
Well, it was at those schools, and it's all based on what they call FARM, the Indexed on Free and Reduced Lunches. So there were it's always in the corridors, around the city. So it was, the northeast into the southeast, southwest, northwest, all around that corridor were our Title I schools. And as a resource teacher, we were managing budgets. We were making sure that students who were identified as needing extra help in either reading or math were receiving extra services by a trained parent helper, which was part of our job to train them, and train instructional assistants. So we did that training piece. But probably the most important I found of that job was the parenting. That's when we started all those parent groups. And I did called Journey Through Selfhood. It was about self-esteem, helping parents nurture their children's self-esteem, and about how to spend quality time with your kids even though you didn't have quantity. So I would do PTA meetings, because that was my little gig as a resource teacher that I did. Some others did things on reading, some did math. So we all had kind of a specialty, and mine was a parent one. which grew into my own business. The Corporate Family Connection. Myself, another resource teacher, and a gal from Harford County, we formed this business, and for 3 years, we would, on our days off, we would go to like Rouse and Company, McCormick. We would set up parenting libraries in their faculty pavilion, wherever they had their lunchroom, and we would do brown bag seminars. Yeah, and one was about reading with your child. One gal did that. One gal did things on math, and I did the self-esteem. So we were, touching all 3 things during these brown bag seminars. So that went on for a couple of years, very successful, but we could only do it on the days that we were off. And then I was promoted to assistant principal, and that was just too much work, and that ended. But it was great. And it's something that all parents need all the time, forever, So we were hitting the working parent.
Yes.
So that was very exciting. So I think those were truly my most creative years, those 6, because I had, once again, that Dr. Binko model of freedom, innovation, study, research, put it together, do your own thing, and it was, it was quite successful.
At some point, though, somebody suggested moving into administration. And how did that come about? And did you think that this was a route that you would travel?
Well, and I always, on my worst days as administrator, I'd call my father up and I'd say, it's all your fault, because my dad used to say to me, now remember, he was a mechanic. He came from the mountains of North Carolina, but he always had high expectations, and he would say to me, you don't want to be just the classroom teacher. No, you want to be the principal. That's what he said to me when I was young. So that always stuck in my head. So when I'd have those bad days as a principal, I'd call him up and say, it's all your fault. But that truly is where it came from. And plus, as a resource teacher, you were in a leadership role.
Right.
And you truly were the confidant of that schoolhouse principal. That's how Karen Schaefer and I became such good friends. I was her resource teacher. She confided in me. We would talk about educational things, instruction piece, what do you think about this? And I had that kind of relationship with all the principals that I work with. Yeah.
So they really
including
were...
Marvin Lusky's first husband. Yeah, I was his resource teacher, Richard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He was a principal.
At Grange Elementary.
There you go.
So that was a leadership, and you had the budget piece because we had to maintain a Title I budget.
Sure, if you're getting federal funding.
Absolutely. Assessment was a big part of our job, making sure kids hit benchmarks way before the rest of the school system was doing that. The federal government always wanted to see benchmarks met. So, yeah. So it was great.
So somebody said,
yes, you better get your Admin 1. So I came here, received my Administration 1 certificate, 18 credits.
18 credits.
Because I already had a master's in reading, so I just needed those 18 credits. And then it was the process of, the interviewing, getting into the pool, what they called the pool of eligible candidates. That's how they do it. You had to go through an interviewing process, and you formed a pool. And then when openings came, you were placed in jobs. So you didn't have any say on where you're going to be placed. So I drove for 2 years from Bel Air to Catonsville, Westtown Elementary School. 2 years.
As an assistant principal.
And then I was promoted to principal at Bedford Elementary in Pikesville. And that was during the day. It was under, our superintendent was Stuart Berger. So he had parents interview candidates, and they selected the principal of their school.
Really?
Like the PTA or whatever. And so on a hot, I'll never forget it, it was July 7th, a hot summer day, I traveled to 3 different schools for these interviews with parent groups. And Bedford, which is a 99% African American school, selected me. Yeah, and it was a great school. It was challenging, very challenging, but a great school.
You fortunately had experience with parents. And that kind of training sort of done mostly on your own, but so.
That was very helpful.
Must have been.
And that's when I began, the process of hiring teachers.
Yes.
I always, when you're in a Title I school, you always have openings because they're tough schools. the teachers come and go in those schools. They burn out.
Uh-huh.
So it would be nothing to have 13 new teachers in a given year because of the transition and all that. Some didn't make it. So we always had new teachers, but I love that part of my job. Training them, shaping them, having them look at instruction, lots of observations, lots of feedback, that sort of thing. So a lot of individual staff development, professional development happened when you particularly had new teachers, because you were in their rooms all the time, demonstration lessons and that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed that part of my career. It was great.
That's something I'd like you to talk a little bit more about is what you were looking for. I would assume that Baltimore County had some process for hiring where potential teachers were pre-screened.
Right.
And then at some point, you as a principal would interview them?
Yes. They would send them out. You would say you have an opening, say in 2nd grade or 5th grade or whatever, and then they would send you the names of people to interview. They'd already been, like you said, screened. They'd already looked at their GPAs, their transcripts, all that sort of thing. So you knew that they were ready to go to be interviewed.
Right. And what were you looking for?
Well, first, I always looked at where did they student teach, because I was always in a challenging school. Hawthorne, being in Middle River, certainly was more Caucasian, whatever, but terribly deprived. A lot of addictions, kids on the streets, that sort of thing. Whereas the climate of the African American School of Bedford, socioeconomically, they were varied, and parents were very involved with their kids, and those kids, came to school prepared and ready to learn, and they were bright. Whereas this little pocket of children, they had, pitiful lives, no warm meals, came to school. We had a full-time social worker, just there providing their basic needs. So I was always curious in both schools, where did your student teach? What kind of environment did you come from? If you told me that you came from this higher economic area, almost like a public-private school, you might have a little trouble with the Bedford, which was definitely one culture, and certainly with the Middle River population. So I'd always kind of look at that. And then I want to know about other experiences with kids. Were you someone that sought out, the camp for special needs students? Did you try to subsidize sort of your experience with children if you were in kind of an Ivy League type, public school setting and student teaching? Did you, volunteer at a camp? Did you work in the summer playground at a poor area? That sort of thing. So that kind of told me a lot about them.
Yes.
The thing that they needed to round out their experience. We talked about instruction, and they, of course, would go through the process of how they plan a lesson or whatever, and I'd like to throw in a little curve, what about little Joey in the back who really hasn't been watching you or listening or can't really get it that way? How would you differentiate instruction? And that was the part that I saw they were still weak in, the part that I didn't have when I started. So I knew it was my job to make sure that I taught them those things they needed to fill that gap on differentiating instruction for kids. Because they could all talk the talk. They knew how to answer those kinds of questions. Then I would always ask them a question personally about a time in their life where they persevered. Because I tell you, being a new teacher, perseverance is a top quality because it's hard. There's no way about it. It takes long hours and it's hard. And are you going to tell me about a time when you did that in your past, so then I'll know you're going to hang in there and you're going to stick this out, because this is going to be a bumpy ride. So I would ask questions like that. So.
But they actually didn't do like a demonstration lesson or anything?
We did not do that. No, we did not. They all came with beautiful portfolios that you could, and I always looked at them because I know how hard they worked on them. It's a lot of work.
It is.
So I would be very interested and, look at it and point out things. But, yeah.
But you had your own set of questions.
I did.
I know.
Absolutely.
So tell me about being a principal. You were at 2 different schools?
2 different schools. Yep.
And What does a principal do?
Well, very seldom do you ever eat lunch. I was much thinner when I was a principal. Then I came to Towson, I sit a lot. Your day is, every day is different. You would never know what you were going to face going into that building. You know, it might be a child that brought a knife to school. It could be an irate parent because you forgot to send the field trip slips home. The teacher didn't do what they were supposed to do. But I always stuck to my observation schedule, you know, because I was very deliberate in always making sure that I was in those classrooms. And if they were a new teacher, and I had a lot of them, they had to be formally observed 4 times during that first half of the year.
Really?
And we'd have many redos because I made them redo it until they got it right. So if parents came in and they were irate or crazy or the kids were coming here, I would fit them in around my schedule because to me, instruction was the key. And I needed to be there no matter what. Now, if it's a life-death situation, there's some bloodshed involved, of course. But I stuck to that. I always stuck to that. That was very important. So you always got there early enough because you could get the parents coming or the teacher coming down to complain about something, and you stayed late for those various reasons, you know. But every day was different, not predictable. And on the side, you still had to maintain a budget. You know, you had to supervise the custodial staff. You had to make sure that Parks and Recs and groups that were using your building had access to it. And you had to do that PR in the community. You know, I was always fundraising kind of things, particularly at Hawthorne, because it was such a needy, you know, area. Trying to get a church to buy a townhouse in that community to set up as an outreach for kids to have a place to do homework, or a food bank, or that. So I was always, you know, that's where they needed that sort of thing more.
Right. With all your own personal experience and coming through Towson's teacher education program, what do you think really are the most important ingredients, pieces that should be in a prep program for teachers? Were there things in your own? Well, you had talked about a few things that you sort of got serendipitously,
Right.
rather than as part of the curriculum. What do you think that we need to provide our prospective teachers?
You know, it was tough because I persevered. But those first 2 years of taking geography and the math and all that, I thought, can I stick this out? I thought if they would just throw me a bone, like an education course in there within at least that second year to just, you know, get that appetite going and to be successful. You know, it was very hard for me coming from being like an A student in high school, coming here, taking history, and, you know, getting a C or even a D. I had to take a course over at Hartford Community one. That was devastating to me. But of course, when I got in the education course, what I loved, I excelled. But I thought, if they could have just thrown in one of those courses a little earlier, or had me go out to a school a little earlier, I probably would have sweated through studying for that geography exam, knowing that this was going to lead me there. I think that's hard, and I don't know if that's still an issue with young people, but I always wanted them to put those courses a little earlier. You know, I think they do a great job now because you stay in a school at an extended period of time, junior year into your, you know, senior year. That sort of model that's going on now, I think, is very, you know, beneficial. But boy, I could have used something a little earlier.
Yeah. Well, I think, right, and you had said you almost took over a classroom in your own experience as a student teacher, but that you'd had a teacher in place who had gotten those kids ready, so that probably being a new teacher wasn't as difficult as if you had started the school year being a new teacher.
Right.
Even though you weren't quite teacher.
No.
I mean, now they go back when teachers come back, which means they help set up the classroom. And they're in from the beginning. So that probably helps with things like learning classroom management.
It does. The whole organizational piece to being a teacher. Some of my good friends are supervisors of interns. Kim Bunch is one of them.
Ah.
And we talk often, about the benefits of what she does in the 2-year period where, she teaches them in their junior year and she's with them for 2 years. And she knows when they're ready to graduate that they will be a successful teacher. And I always love having her tell me, so tell me where your kids are. Where did your students end up? Every one of them have teaching jobs this year, and she tracks them and follows them into that. And I think that is worthwhile, beneficial. Now, she is truly their mentor, not only the classroom supervising teacher, but Kim's role with that 2-year period of time is so beneficial. And she was a principal. And she hired teachers like I did, so she knew what she was looking for and what she expected out of this, this group. And of course, there are always the students that are in there and teaching's really not their thing. And so then you have to make those decisions, and strong decisions, about saying this is not for you. Having those conversations is very difficult when they're, in their junior year or whatever, but has to be made.
Well, and if she's been a principal, then she's probably had to do that with
she has.
With her own
Absolutely.
teachers, her own faculty.
I think the model now is really a good model for training teachers.
Well, let's get back to you. And we left you as a principal.
Yes, you did. I'm still in one piece. 10.5 years. It was good. Absolutely.
And then a new opportunity presented
Towson Learning
itself.
Network. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that came from somebody on campus.
Yep. Saw an opening. Barb Ellis, who started the Towson Learning Network, I was her resource teacher at Grange. I'll tell you, that was a great job. Talk about
Yeah,
networking.
Really?
It really was a great job. So she, of course, was here, and when that job came open, she, of course, was good friends with Karen Schaefer, and I'd been her resource teacher. So Carol Stewart was here. I'd been her resource teacher. So they all said, oh, this would be a perfect job for Barb. So I couldn't turn it down.
There you go.
And it is a good job. It really is.
I would imagine that you are still using a whole bunch of your professional skills that you have accrued over time, being both a teacher and a principal and administrator in what you're doing now. Two questions, or one request, and that's that you tell us a little bit about the Towson Learning Network, because it really has to do still with teacher preparation, just at the in-service level rather than pre-service. And then give us a sense of how this just was an appropriate and effective transition for you, using some of those skills that you learned both as a teacher and as an administrator.
Alrighty. I've been here now 7 years.
Uh-huh.
And when I started, we were just for the College of Ed. That was Towson Learning Network. We just did all College of Ed all over the state. And it was, of course, partnerships with school systems. And the clincher for the deal was the fact that teachers would pay minimum out of pocket, like anywhere from $50 to $150. And the school system would pay the rest of the tuition at the current reimbursement rate for that school system. So the teachers theoretically were getting a master's degree for a minimum amount of money. And we know the implications of that, because all of us had to pay, of course, full price for a master's degree. So the cost was certainly there for teachers. It was great. It was convenient because we were in the school systems. The folks down in Montgomery County didn't have to drive to Towson University. We would deliver a full master's program to them. Howard County, PG, wherever we were going, and it would be full master's. And we always said to them, it's the same rigor as you would have on campus, that sort of thing. So a lot of that stemmed from the needs of school systems, whatever it was that they had a deficit in, whether it was special ed, school library media, if they needed more reading specialists, they would contact us. We would go and have a dialogue with a department person here. We were the liaison between the system and the university. It was a great model, and we would help in those discussions because we could help the school system map out a course of study. Because teachers want things done quickly now. They want to finish in 2 years, not 5. So we could help a department figure out a way of designing it, take 2 courses in a semester. We had a lot of flexibility. So we would lay out different plans for school systems, and this is the proper sequence of courses. The department would agree, and so we made that connection. So a lot of the skills we had, marketing-wise, we were always marketing education as principals, we've used in school systems, because sometimes they don't always think outside the box as to how to orchestrate this or how to get it down to a 2-year or 3-year program instead of like a 5-year. And teachers didn't want to do that. So we've done a lot of that. We go to school systems, and oftentimes they don't know what Towson University offers. So we'll talk about the programs here on campus and how pretty much we can bring anything to your school system within reason. And of course, that's with conversations here on campus with the department chairs. So they often don't realize what we can offer teachers. So that's always been an eye-opening experience down there. And we always have a protocol in place that we do an information meeting, we meet with the teachers, we sense how they would like it to run, how they would like the courses set up. We make it work for them. We always are accessible when they have questions about the registration process, because that can be cumbersome at times. So it is that cost, it's convenient, and it is the content. I mean, we talk to them about, you're going to have the same assessments as if you were here on campus, so that they know they are a part of Towson University. We explain that their one card works here on campus. They are considered alumni when they finish the program. So we truly are ambassadors for Towson University, and of course we believe in the quality of education we had here, and so it's kind of easy for us to go out there and sell it. Unfortunately, now we're not just College of Ed. We've grown, and there was a need for that because not all the programs were as organized as the College of Ed. So now we take care of all of the off-campus programs. I think in the fall we registered about 3,600 students.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's in all areas.
And that's all over the place.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Now, do you do things, getting back to education, do you do things for schools other than master's degrees?
We do. We have post-bac certificates, but we also have a relationship with our PDS schools, our professional development schools, where our interns are located. We often get calls. They have coursework in their strategic plans that they do, and they'll call us, can you offer a brain-based research class or a technology course, because it's in our strategic plan. And so then we work with an individual school on setting that up just for the teachers in that school. So we do single courses when needed, requested. I think probably the best are always the master programs, because it's sustained across time. It's professional development across time. The single courses, not so much. It's something of interest at the time. We don't always know if there's follow-up or whatever, but we know when it's a full post-bac or a master's program, that the teachers are getting a full education. But we do have that service for our PDS schools, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea of PDS, is that a school can look at their strategic plan and say, this is sort of what we are seeing as a need, fairly consistent across faculty, and how nice to have a partner. You can call up and say, could you put something together for us?
Right, we do that readily. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really at the point where I want to ask you, is there something that we haven't talked about that we should
consider?
Yes. Yeah.
For future teachers of America?
Truly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how many. I haven't looked at all the statistics about professional teachers. Are the teachers out there now going to stay 32 and a half years that our generation did? I don't know.
Well, the statistics sort of say that about half of them leave within 5 years. So somebody who's going to stay 25 or 30 years is almost, not quite, but almost the rule rather than, the exception rather than the rule, to stay that long. And your talk about PDS, that's one of the reasons I was interested in that, is, and what you do in relationship to that, is one of the things I think that we're hoping will change that statistic. And actually, I think the College of Ed and the Center for Professional Practice have examine this over time and find that graduates of Towson do in fact stay longer. We're not quite certain all the reasons why, but I think some of the things that you mentioned certainly are part of it. This mentoring, getting familiar with what it's all about earlier in their pre-service training. All those things that you've mentioned certainly seem to make a difference.
Well, I know when we travel to the various counties, they're always pleased, and they go out of their way to tell us how much they say that our Towson interns are ahead of others. You know, that they come more prepared and ready to step into that role as teacher of record than some other. And we have a lot of business, Howard County particularly. We have lots of master's programs down there, and they always say how our interns are always a step ahead of some of the other universities.
That's nice to hear.
It is nice to hear.
And so what would you say? What wisdom would you share for someone thinking about a career as a teacher?
Well, it goes, you have to be willing to work hard. It is a career. You know, it's not a 9-to-5 job. And certainly, you've got to love children. There were days when people would say, well, I don't know if I really love kids, but I want them to learn and I can make them learn. Well, no, you got to love kids, because kids are quirky and they're going to, you know, work on you. So you have to love kids, but it is a career and a dedication. And it does take over your life. You know, it is consuming, long hours, that sort of thing. But the benefits are incredible. To see a young child, you know, be able to read a complete sentence on their own, or to see a high school student be able to solve an algebra problem. There's nothing like it. When that light bulb goes off and they get it, you'll never have a more rewarding job. I often tell that to people, but it could be 1 or 2 out of a group of 15 or so. You know, those little perks and those light bulbs go off. It's not all the time and every day. You know, got to make that happen. So I say to them, you've got to dedicate a lot, and you make a lot of sacrifices, even in your personal life. There are. That's tough. I always am a little concerned at the young administrators, the principals out there that are raising babies and doing that job. I'm thinking somebody out there is getting cheated somewhere. I'm not sure who is doing that. But it's a great career, very rewarding. Makes an impact on society. It does.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's all I have to say. How about that?
I think that's terrific.